Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let me make a basketball analogy for the gamblers out there. Right now, on the over-under in the NBA, I like the under 58.5 for the Golden State Warriors in terms of win total on the season. Right? I like to bet against perfection. For leverage bettors, though, in the NFL, I like the prop being offered. I got it at 12-1. Then the game went off yesterday against Miami. I don't know what it is today, but I like the prop on New England going unbeaten. Simply because you're getting huge leverage on that side of the play. It's not that I believe that New England's going to go unbeaten in the NFL. It's more that I think New England's going to be favored in every home game this season. I think New England can run the table at home. On the road, they have a couple of tough games, right? I think they play the Jets in, the Meadowlands. I think they play Denver in Denver. My point to you is anytime the casino is offering you a play where they're giving you, 12-1 odds or anything in that neighborhood, and you have an opportunity to hedge it later, you need to take that. Understand, by taking New England at 12-1 to win the whole thing, maybe today it's 10-1, right? To go 16-0, you can, whenever they play Denver in Denver, you can simply take Denver in that game for the amount of the bet you made on New England to go 16-0. If Denver beats them, you're hedged. You swung for the fences, didn't get the home run, but didn't incur losses, right? Let's say New England beats Denver, then you're closer to cashing in on your initial bet that had all kind of leverage, right? Then, of course, when New England plays the Jets, that's going to be a ridiculous rematch, right? Jets had New England on the ropes. Again, you could just bet some money on the Jets to offset whatever losses you would incur if New England were to lose that game, right? The losses would be on your initial bet. Okay, I know I've confused everybody. Let me get to boxing. Maybe it'll be a little bit clearer. First, a basketball analogy. Charles Barkley last year was fading the Golden State Warriors. Right? Barkley had a philosophy that jump shooting teams like the Warriors, right, could not win the NBA title. Well, of course, Curry, Klay Thompson, Iguodala, Draymond Green, they're a unique bunch. And the Warriors proved Charles Barkley wrong. But not before. In the playoffs, they suffered a huge scare against Memphis. Look back to that series. Understand, too, Memphis wasn't operating at 100% because Mike Conley was under the weather, right? And, of course, the Warriors got a huge scare from the Cleveland Cavaliers, who jumped out in that series. You might recall Cleveland actually won a game on the Warrior home court. Well, you have the same feud. It's literally, the same type of philosophical gap right now in the light heavyweight division, right? You have two trainers. They're two of the best trainers in the sport. And they disagree, believe it or not, with the other guy's philosophy. Now, boxing has, in my opinion, the best sports media in professional sports, right? Groups like the Boxing Voice and Dante's Boxing Nation here on YouTube do a spectacular job that you don't find elsewhere, right? They will find and interview the players, right? Not just the fighters, but also the fighters' trainers. I'm going to encourage them here. And I'm not, a boxing journalist who goes out and finds anyone to interview. That's not my game. I'm just a gambler trying to get an edge on the casino. But I'm going to encourage the boxing media out there to actually explore the rift. And I'm going to encourage you to Google this. It's a rift between Virgil Hunter, the trainer of Andre Ward, and John David Jackson, the trainer of Sergei Kovalev, right? And what makes their difference of opinion significant is that it's not personal, right? Like Charles Barkley, and I consider Barkley to be one of the best sports analysts anywhere. If you're a gambler, you need to track him, right? But like Charles Barkley believed that, you couldn't be a jump shooting team and win an NBA title, right? I believe that Virgil Hunter believes that you can't just go all out and empty the gun and be as offensive as John David Jackson's fighters like to be, right? These two guys had a memorable dust-up recently in the ring, right? No, Virgil Hunter didn't put on gloves and fight John David Jackson, but Virgil Hunter's fighter, Amir Khan, did, right? Not Jackson, but Jackson's fighter, Chris Algieri. I want people to go back to that fight. I personally feel that Chris Algieri won that match. Understand, Algieri and Jackson had just started working together. Let's just say Algieri is on his front foot, presses the issue, moves the ball up court, is just more offensive, and it's surprising. He was more offensive than an offensively gifted Amir Khan. Isn't that Khan's game? And Khan seemed surprised. Didn't quite know what to do. Was dealing with volume that was outside his understanding of the sport. Now, Andre Ward, according to reports, is moving up to 175. And he wants to fight Sergei Kovalev, right? I hope the Ward people fully understand what that means, right? Because Kovalev took on Bernard Hopkins, master boxer, master defensive wizard, future Hall of Famer, right? Just like Andre Ward is. And yes, there was an age gap in that fight, but that fight was striking. Because early in that fight, and that was a fight where I thought Hopkins had a chance. I was wrong on that fight. Let me be clear here. But early in that fight, it was obvious that Hopkins could not deal with Kovalev's aggression, right? Just could not handle it. Kovalev was on his front foot. Kovalev wasn't falling for Hopkins' feints. Hopkins would have his hands up. Kovalev would hit his hands, right? It's kind of like a Rocky Marciano approach to boxing, right? Hopkins' feints eventually became almost irrelevant because Kovalev was the lead. Kovalev was dictating the pace, the tempo. Hopkins, who was able to go 24 rounds against Jean Pascal, was able to catch breathers, knows how to take breathers during rounds, right? Knows how to move away, knows how to feint while he rests and stuff like that. Couldn't find a pit stop, couldn't find a rest station, couldn't find sanctuary during his fight against Sergei Kovalev. Let me say this too. Let's talk about fighters who change weights. There's an age dynamic to it, isn't there? In other words, let me say this. When you're in your 20s, when you're in your mid-20s especially, if you're a daredevil, you can say things like, you know what? Let me lose a few pounds. Let me at least lose a few pounds for the weigh-in, and let me go fight the guy in the lower weight class, right? Then your body's able to bounce back after the fight. Understand, your body doesn't bounce back that well when you're in your mid-30s, right? When you're on the other side of 30, especially when you've been as inactive as Andre Ward has been, right? Let me say this too. I believe it's easier for young guys to fight at the higher weight class, because keep in mind, they don't have to gain the weight, right? The weigh-in is really for a weight limit. James DeGale, the champ at 168, could easily say, let me go take on some light heavies. He could show up at the weigh-in weighing 168 or 170. No one's going to care, because if the fight is at light heavyweight, well, he's fighting as a light heavyweight, right? After that fight, he could easily then turn around and say, okay, let me get back to my kingdom. Let me get back to 168. Let me fight the top contenders here. Let me show why I am champion here. Now, in Andre Ward's case, it's different, isn't it? He's moving from 168 to 175 pounds. You get the feeling that he's making the move because his body has told him, dude, I'm not going to make 168 anymore. Right? We can jump rope all day. We can do road work all day and stuff like that. We're in our 30s now. We're older now. Right? I can't make 168 anymore. And if I do, then I'm going to punish you stamina-wise later in the fight. Right? So I believe Ward is moving to 175, and I have no inside information. I believe Ward is moving to 175 out of necessity. In my opinion, that makes him vulnerable. Will make him vulnerable to guys like Kovalev who've been at 175 in the later rounds and draining fights. Right? You know, I don't have any question now that Kovalev's gone the distance against Hopkins, now that Kovalev went several rounds against Jean Pascal, a guy I feel is better than the public realizes. Right? Those were big-time litmus tests at 175 pounds. Big time. I have no doubt about Kovalev in terms of his level of fitness at 175, how he carries the weight. He's carried the weight. With Andre Ward, there's going to be a period of adjustment to a new weight class. Right? This isn't the old 168 neighborhood. This is something different now. The characters are different. Right? You got Pascal. Mentally, I'm telling you, Pascal is like Miguel Cotto. Mentally, I believe they're the same guy. Think about Pascal's career. Right? Pascal fought Hopkins twice. Pascal fought Chad Dawson at 175 pounds. No catch weight. Right? Pascal fought Bute. Pascal fought Sergei Kovalev. Pascal, like Cotto, is a daredevil. It's a mountain climber mentality. Right? Why do you want to climb Mount Everest? Mountain climbers will tell you, because it's there. Right? I personally believe that if Cotto beats Canelo, Cotto's going to fight Golovkin. Why? Because Golovkin's there. Because Cotto needs to climb Mount Everest every time out. Why is he fighting Saul Alvarez? Because Canelo's there. Right? Because Canelo's a big name. Because Miguel Cotto is not the kind of guy who can sit on his sofa knowing that there are big names out there around his weight class who he hasn't fought. I believe Pascal is the same way. I have no doubt in my mind that the reason why Pascal hasn't fought Adonis Stevenson is because Stevenson flatly refuses to fight Pascal. Because I know Jean Pascal is a guy who views 175 as his neighborhood. Right? So he takes on all comers. Let me say, Pascal, in my opinion, is one of the most dangerous men in boxing. He's one of the most dangerous opponents. Right? The Ward people need to be aware of that. Understand, too, other guys at 175 pounds, I believe Ward today, can beat Adonis Stevenson. Right? I think if Ward gets inside on Stevenson, it's game over. Right? I think Stevenson's a guy who's throwing a jab, right? Southpaw, throws a lot of people off. Understand, Andre Ward is ambidextrous. Right? I don't think the southpaw stance will throw Andre Ward off. Right? I think Stevenson, a southpaw, throws people off with a perfunctory jab. I think his straight left hand is among the best punches in boxing. When you think Adonis Stevenson, you should be thinking Manny Pacquiao. It's the same kind of outsized and the same kind of straight left hand. Right? The million-dollar question, though, is whether Stevenson lands that left hand against Andre Ward. Right? If I were Ward, Stevenson, who has a title at 175 pounds, would be one of the men I target. But understand how much of a new neighborhood this is. Andre Ward's from Northern California, my neck of the woods. Right? Just understand that if he fights Pascal, if he fights Stevenson, that fight would be at the Bell Center, wouldn't it? Right? That fight would be before a Canadian crowd, wouldn't it? In other words, 175 is not just bringing different players to the party. It's bringing a different crowd, isn't it? It's bringing Canada, a different country, isn't it? Let's face it, too. Artur Beterbiev has decided to make Canada his home. Right? So, just understand, it's turbulent at 175 pounds. Let's talk about another crowd. Let's talk about another fighter. I keep telling people not to sleep on the boxing scene in the city of Chicago. Right? Rahm Emanuel's kingdom. Right? Barack Obama's kingdom. Let me just say this. You got a light heavyweight from Chicago, or at least fighting out of Chicago. Andres Fonfara, who already got off the canvas against Adonis Stevenson and realized that he should have taken Stevenson's title that night. Right? Let's just say at the end of that fight, I'm sure Stevenson thought to himself, damn, I'm glad this is over. Right? This is the same Fonfara who embarrassed. Isn't that the word? Embarrassed Julio Cesar Chavez in front of a Chavez crowd in Southern California. Embarrassed him. This is the same Fonfara who recently delivered for gamblers who follow my YouTube station here against Nathan Cleverly in Chicago. I'm just telling you that if Andre Ward travels to Chicago to fight Andres Fonfara, let's hope he brings friends and family with him, because they'll be the only people in the crowd rooting for him in that fight. So pay close attention to Andre Ward entering the light heavyweight division. But more importantly, pay even closer attention to the contrasting styles of Virgil Hunter and John David Jackson. Understand, Kovalev is a guy who was on his front foot against Jean Pascal. And I'm telling you, Pascal has a huge punch. Right? Let me say this. Freddie Roach fighters, let's just talk styles. Freddie Roach fighters are episodic, right? They like to move around the ring. Think Cotto against Delvin Rodriguez, right? They use their legs. Think Amir Khan when he was with Freddie Roach, right? They like to use their legs. They like to be outside. Then they come in and they use hand speed. Or they throw their best punches. Miguel Cotto jumping inside, throwing a left hook. Right? They hang out just enough to hurt you. Then they back out. Amir Khan against Zab Judah. Right? You didn't realize Judah's legs weren't close to Khan's until that fight. Khan moving around the ring, jumping in, flashing hand speed, then backing back out was a revelation. Right? Even though Judah had Pernell Whitaker in his corner, Judah's defense never became an issue because Khan didn't linger in the pocket long enough to make it an issue. Now that's a Freddie Roach approach. Let's talk about a Virgil Hunter approach. Virgil Hunter's guys will stay more in the pocket than Freddie Roach fighters. Right? Freddie Roach fighters are emphasizing offense. They use their legs for defense. Manny Pacquiao, right? Pacquiao's not lingering around the pocket, blocking shots, leaning, creating angles. That's not his game. His game is to come after you with a straight left hand, and then when you start to fire back, he bounces someplace else. Virgil Hunter's fighters are actually prepared in the pocket to actually block your shots. To actually block a shot, then throw a counter from the pocket. Right? Don't get me wrong. Virgil Hunter's guys will be on their back foot from time to time. They'll come inside from time to time. But they're trying to actually play chess with you. Virgil Hunter has his guys more at the chessboard. Now that leads to some confusion at times, doesn't it? Because Amir Khan against Julio Diaz, for example. Diaz drops Khan. Right? Khan was at the chessboard, didn't quite know what to do. Because Freddie Roach would have had Khan playing more to his strengths. Hand speed, suddenness. Whereas Virgil Hunter insists that you actually learn how to defend yourself in the pocket. Now let's talk about John David Jackson. I find this guy to be interesting. Right? He has another fighter, Cuba Arias, who's very interesting. These guys come in the pocket, and they don't want to spend a lot of time blocking your shots. They want to be the guys doling out the punishment. Right? So, you'll notice there are angles involved. In other words, Chris Algieri or Kovalev will come in and lean. Right? The guy comes in and he's leaning, and he's throwing this hand. The idea is that you can't hit him from this side. Right? Because the guy is setting up planes. It's a real advanced plane game where the guy's coming in and he's trying to hurt you. But he's doing it at certain angles where you really can't hit him. And the guy's hyper aggressive. In other words, where he lands shots, it could be on your shoulder, it could be on your bicep. But he's going to keep you busy on your front foot while he's doling out punishment. In other words, the game is to be in front of you, to be offensive, not defensive, right? Kovalev's not spending a lot of time going, No. Kovalev's spending a lot of time instead throwing punches from these angles, right? It's a different philosophy. The light heavyweight division right now hinges on that philosophy. Eventually, John David Jackson's going to meet Virgil Hunter, right? I believe eventually Kovalev's going to fight Andre Ward, right? But Andre needs to be careful, because as Andre fights to get to that fight, he needs to understand that the water is dangerous here, right? Let me throw out another name. I believe he loses his next match, but I think this guy's still dangerous, and that's Lucien Bute, who also has fought at light heavyweight and who also fights out of the Bell Center, right? I think Pascal and Bute are more dangerous than the public, right? I know the Carl Froch crowd will say, hey, didn't we destroy Bute? Let's recall that Carl Froch was in a fight for his life when a then unbeaten Daredevil, Jean Pascal, traveled to Froch's hometown to fight Carl Froch. Froch won the fight. It went the distance. It was a tough match. I'm sure Carl Froch today understands that fighting Jean Pascal is not a walk in the park, right? 175 is not 168, right? This is a real tough neighborhood with some undervalued guys fighting in front of some of the sport's most passionate boxing fans. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Let me also apologize for rambling at the beginning of this video about NBA and NFL picks. Just understand, you can find links to videos where I make picks in those sports at dwyervip.com. Thanks for stopping by.